My family cut me off for 8 months because I wouldn't co-sign my brother's $60,000 truck loan. Then Dad called, desperate for cash to fix his transmission. I told him I don't help strangers, but I didn't tell him I knew the terrifying reason he was actually broke. The fever had been burning through me for 3 days when the doorbell finally rang. I remember lying on the sofa, wrapped in 2 heavy duvets, shivering so violently that my teeth were actually chattering. I had text messaged my mother, Lydia, earlier that morning, telling her that the flu had turned into something worse, something that felt like it was settling deep in my chest. I asked if she could drop off some medicine and maybe a container of soup on her way back from the grocery store. When the bell rang, a wave of relief washed over me. I thought, thank God, Mom is here. I stumbled to the door, my vision swimming, feeling weak and pathetic. I unlocked the deadbolt and pulled it open, expecting to see my mother's concerned face. Instead, I saw Walker. My younger brother stood there, leaning against the doorframe with that casual, arrogant slouch he had perfected over 30 years. He wasn't holding soup. He wasn't holding medicine. He was holding a sleek, black leather folder. He looked me up and down, taking in my pale face, the sweat-matted hair, the trembling hands clutching the blanket, and he didn't even ask how I was. "Hey, Lucy," he said, stepping past me into the living room without an invitation. "Mom said you were homesick, so I figured it was a good time to catch you." "Walker," I croaked, my voice barely a whisper. I closed the door, leaning against it for support. "Did Mom send anything? I feel like I'm dying." "She's busy," he said dismissively, tossing the leather folder onto my coffee table. It landed with a heavy slap. "She's helping me sort out the insurance for the new rig. That's why I'm here. I need a signature. Like, right now. The dealership closes in an hour." I stared at him, my brain moving through sludge. "What?" "The truck, Lucy. The Ford. The beast I showed you last week," Walker said, his voice taking on that edge of impatience he always used when I didn't immediately give him what he wanted. "My credit score is still dinged from that crypto thing last year, and the bank is being a pain. Dad's tapped out on credit utilization because of the renovation, so I need you to co-sign. It's 60 grand, standard term." He said 60 grand, the way normal people say $60. "Walker," I whispered, clutching my stomach as a wave of nausea hit me. "I can't. I'm sick. Can we talk about this later?" "No, we can't talk later," he snapped, pacing around my small living room, his boots leaving mud tracks on my rug. "I told them I'd be back by 5. Just sign the damn paper, Lucy. It's not a big deal. I've got a contract coming up that's going to pay for the whole thing in 3 months anyway." I looked at the folder. Then I looked at my brother. He hadn't asked if I was okay. He hadn't brought me water. He saw me visibly shaking, barely able to stand, and all he saw was a credit score he could exploit. "No," I said. The word felt heavy, like a stone in my mouth. Walker stopped pacing. He turned slowly, his eyes narrowing. "What did you say?" "I said no," I repeated, my voice gaining a tiny fraction of strength from the sheer audacity of his request. "I'm not co-signing a $60,000 loan for a truck you don't need, Walker. Not after the business loan I helped you with 3 years ago, the one I ended up paying off." Walker's face flushed a deep, ugly red. "That was different. That was a market crash. This is a sure thing. You're really going to screw me over like this? Mom and Dad are counting on me getting this truck for the business." "Then let Mom and Dad sign for it," I said, coughing harshly. "Please, Walker, just leave. I need to lie down." He grabbed the folder off the table, gripping it so hard the leather creaked. He walked up to me, invading my personal space, looming over me while I huddled in my blanket. "You're selfish, Lucy," he spat, his voice dripping with venom. "You sit here in your nice condo with your nice job, hoarding everything, while the rest of us actually try to build something. Mom was right. You don't care about anyone but yourself." "Get out," I wheezed. "Fine," he said, heading for the door. "But don't expect us to come running next time you need something. You're making a choice right now, Lucy. Make sure you can live with it." He slammed the door so hard the pictures on my wall rattled. I collapsed onto the sofa, weeping not just from the sickness, but from the shock of it. I waited for my phone to ring. I waited for my mother to call and apologize for him, or to ask if I needed that medicine. The phone never rang. Not that night. Not the next day. And when I finally mustered the strength to call my mother 3 days later, the call went straight to voicemail. The betrayal was worse than the fever itself. It wasn't just that they wanted my money, it was that my value to them began and ended with my signature. The first month was a blur of confusion and a specific, hollow kind of grief. I kept telling myself it was a temper tantrum. I told myself that Miles and Lydia, my parents, were just stressed, that Walker had spun some story to make himself the victim, and that eventually, cooler heads would prevail. I expected a text message from my dad, maybe a meme or a link to a news article like he used to send. I expected a guilt-tripping voicemail from my mom. But I got nothing. It was absolute radio silence. I recovered from the flu alone. I made my own soup. I picked up my own prescriptions. And in the silence of my apartment, I started to realize just how much of my life had revolved around fixing their problems. Without the constant chaotic updates about Walker's latest venture, or my mother's complaints about the neighbors, my life was peaceful. Quiet. But it was a lonely peace. The real knife to the heart came 3 months later, my 32nd birthday. I had always made a big deal out of birthdays. For Mom's 60th last year, I had organized a surprise party, catered it, and paid for their weekend getaway to the coast. For Walker's 30th, I had, stupidly, bought him a high-end watch he had pawned 6 months later. On the morning of my birthday, I woke up and stared at my phone. I checked my texts. Nothing. I checked my email. Nothing. I checked Facebook. My mother had posted a photo of Walker standing next to a brand-new lifted black truck, the truck with the caption, "So proud of my son and his new business journey. Hard work pays off." There was no mention of me. No happy birthday post. It was as if I had been erased from the family narrative entirely. I spent the day at work, trying to focus on spreadsheets and variance analysis, but my eyes kept drifting to the calendar. I went home, ordered a small pizza, and sat on my balcony, watching the city lights. I drank a glass of wine and let the tears finally fall. It wasn't just the silence, it was the calculated cruelty of it. They knew how much family meant to me. They were using my love for them as a weapon to punish me for closing my wallet. My phone buzzed, my heart jumped. I snatched it up, hoping, praying it was Dad. It was an automated alert from the bank. Primary account balance below threshold. I stared at the screen, confused for a second, then I remembered. Years ago, when my parents were struggling with digital banking, I had set up their online accounts. I had linked their emails, but I had also put my email as a backup for security alerts because Dad kept forgetting his password and locking himself out. They had cut me out of their lives, blocked my number, and ignored my birthday. But in their arrogance, or perhaps their sheer incompetence, they had forgotten one crucial thing. They never removed my administrative access to their entire financial life. I didn't log in, not yet. I respected their privacy, even then. But as I sat there on my birthday, alone, watching that notification, a cold realization settled over me. The alert said their checking account had dipped below $50. Miles and Lydia were retired. They had a pension. They had Social Security. They shouldn't be hitting zero balance alerts in the middle of the month. The silence from them was designed to hurt me, to make me crawl back and beg for forgiveness with my checkbook in hand. But that single notification was the first loose thread in a sweater I was about to unravel. They thought they were punishing me, but they were actually hiding a disaster. To understand why this hurt so much, you have to understand the history. I wasn't just a daughter, I was the safety net. For the last decade, I was the one who made sure things worked. When Dad needed his hip surgery, I navigated the insurance appeals. When Mom wanted to redo the kitchen but didn't understand the contractor's quote, I negotiated it down by 15%. And when Walker was a full-time job on his own. Walker was the definition of potential wasted on arrogance. He was handsome, charismatic, and completely allergic to traditional employment. He viewed a 9-to-5 job as a personal insult. He was always an entrepreneur, a visionary, a CEO in the making. In reality, he was a con artist who preyed exclusively on people who loved him. There was the drone photography business that failed because he crashed the drone into a neighbor's pool. I paid for the damages. There was the custom sneaker flipping business, where he bought $5,000 of inventory that turned out to be counterfeit. I helped him cover the loss so he wouldn't get sued. Miles and Lydia didn't see a leech. They saw a dreamer who just needed one big break. They had created a narrative where I was the stable, boring one who existed to support the special, creative one. The antagonist of my life wasn't just Walker. It was the version of Walker my parents insisted on believing in. A week after my birthday, I decided to drive past my parents' house. I didn't stop. I just wanted to see if the house was still standing, if they were okay. I parked down the street, hidden by a large oak tree. And then I saw him, Walker. He pulled into the driveway in the truck, the $60,000 truck. It was a monstrosity, lifted high, matte black paint, customized rims that probably cost more than my first car. He hopped out, wearing a designer jacket and sunglasses, looking every inch the successful business owner. But something was off. He didn't go to the front door. He walked around the side of the house to the garage. He keyed in the code, the door rolled up, and I saw inside. My father's workshop, his pride and joy, filled with 30 years of woodworking tools, was empty. The table saw, the drill press, the lathe, all gone. My stomach dropped. Dad loved those tools. He spent every weekend out there. Then Miles came out of the back door of the house. He looked older than I remembered. He was thinner, his shoulders slumped. He walked up to Walker and I saw them arguing. It wasn't a friendly chat. Dad was gesturing at the empty garage, his face red. Walker just laughed, clapped Dad on the shoulder, and pointed at the shiny new truck as if to say, "Look at this beauty, isn't it worth it?" Dad stopped arguing. He just looked at the truck, then looked at the ground, defeated. Walker had done something. He hadn't just bought a truck, he was stripping them for parts. I drove home shaking. My brother wasn't just irresponsible anymore, he was predatory. He was polished, he was smiling, and he was eating our parents alive while they thanked him for the privilege. And because they had cut me off, I had no way to warn them, no way to step in, and, according to them, no right to know. But that notification from the bank was still burning a hole in my mind. I got home, sat at my desk, and opened my laptop. My finger hovered over the banking login page. I knew the password. Lydia Miles 1985. They never changed it. If I logged in, I was invading their privacy. I was breaking the silence they had imposed. But if I didn't, I had a sinking feeling there wouldn't be anything left to save by Christmas. I took a deep breath and I clicked login. The screen flickered, and the dashboard of my parents' bank account loaded. I expected to see things tight. I expected to see maybe a few $1,000s missing, perhaps a dip in their savings to cover a few of Walker's essential business expenses. I was prepared to be angry. I wasn't prepared to be horrified. The first thing that hit me was the color red. It was everywhere. Their primary checking account, which usually held a comfortable buffer of about $5,000 for bills and groceries, was sitting at negative $42. There were 3 overdraft fees from just yesterday. My heart hammered against my ribs as I clicked on the transaction history. It was a hemorrhage. Transfer to Zelle, Walker Business, $500. Transfer to Zelle, Walker Business, $1,200. ATM withdrawal Casino District, $400. Debit purchase, Luxury Auto Detail, $350. I scrolled back. Month after month, the pattern was the same. Since the day they stopped talking to me, the outflows had increased exponentially. It started small, grocery money, gas money, but then the chunks got bigger. I clicked over to their savings account. the nest egg they had been building since the late 90s. The money meant for assisted living, for medical emergencies, for peace of mind. Balance, $124.50. I gasped aloud in the empty silence of my apartment. Oh God, Dad, what did you do? But the worst discovery was yet to come. I tabbed over to the loan status section. I didn't even know they had active loans. The house had been paid off 5 years ago. That was their biggest achievement. They threw a party when they burned the mortgage note. There, staring back at me, was a new line item. Home equity line of credit, HELOC. Principal balance, $145,000. Interest rate, 9.8% variable. Status, past due 60 days. I felt sick, physically sick. In 8 months, less than a year, Walker hadn't just taken a loan, he had convinced them to sign their house over to the bank to fund his delusions. He had stripped them. They weren't just broke, they were drowning, and they were 2 months away from foreclosure. I sat back in my chair, my hands trembling. This wasn't a family dispute anymore. This was financial elder abuse. I spent the next 3 nights building my case. I didn't sleep. I functioned on black coffee and adrenaline. I printed statements. I highlighted transactions. I used my access to public property records to pull the lien documents on the house. I saw the notary stamp. I saw my father's shaky sign. At or next to Walker's bold, sweeping autograph. I needed to know where the money went. A business doesn't burn $145,000 in 8 months with zero revenue unless the business is a front for something else. I used a forensic accounting technique I used at work for corporate audits. I cross-referenced the merchant codes on the debit withdrawals. Walker wasn't buying inventory. He wasn't paying for marketing. The codes were for DraftKings, FanDuel, and a consulting firm that, after a quick Google search, turned out to be a shell company for a high-end escort service in the city. I had the smoking gun. I had the bullets. I had the entire crime scene mapped out in a 3-ring binder. Then, on a Tuesday evening, exactly 8 months and 4 days since the silence began, my phone rang. The screen said, "Dad." I stared at it. The audacity was breathtaking. They ignore my birthday. They ignore my illness. They delete me from their lives. And now they call. I let it ring 4 times before picking up. I didn't say hello. I just breathed into the receiver. "Lucy," his voice sounded thin, weak. "Lucy, are you there?" "I'm here," I said, my voice ice cold. "Listen, we haven't spoken in a while," he stammered. He sounded rehearsed, like someone reading from a script Walker had written. "We missed you." "You missed me?" I asked. "Or do you need something?" "Now, don't be like that," he said, trying for a jovial tone that cracked immediately. "Look, we're in a bit of a bind. The transmission on the sedan blew out yesterday, just completely died on the highway. I'm stuck. The mechanic says it's a full rebuild." "That sounds unfortunate," I said. "It is, it really is. And with the business investments we've made recently, our liquidity is a little tied up until the end of the quarter. I just need a bridge loan, just until Friday. I need $6,000, Lucy." $6,000. He was asking for $6,000 when I knew for a fact he had negative $42 to his name. $6,000 by Friday, I repeated. "Yes, I promise, as soon as Walker's contract clears next week, I'll pay you back with interest." Something inside me snapped. It was the mention of Walker's contract. The lie was so casual, so practiced. "I'm sorry," I said, my voice steady and sharp. "I don't talk to strangers." There was a stunned silence on the other end. "What? Lucy, I'm your father." "No," I said. "My father wouldn't ghost me for a year because I wouldn't fund his son's toy. My father wouldn't miss my birthday. You're a stranger who has my father's number, and I don't lend money to strangers." "Lucy, please," the desperation broke through, his voice cracked. "I can't get to my doctor's appointments. We have no car. Walker's truck is busy." Of course it was. "I won't give you the money," I said, "but I will give you a chance to explain why you're really broke. Because I know it's not just liquidity issues, Miles. What do you mean? I mean, if you want help, you, Mom, and Walker meet me at my office tomorrow at 10:00 a.m. Bring your financial records. Bring the loan documents for the truck. If you tell me the truth, I'll pay for the transmission directly to the mechanic. If you lie to me even once, I walk away and you never see me again. Walker won't come, Dad whispered. Then you can walk to your doctor's appointments, I said. 10:00 a.m., don't be late. I hung up, I looked at the binder on my desk. The trap was set. My office has a glass-walled conference room that overlooks the city skyline. It's designed to be intimidating. It screams competence and authority. I reserved it specifically for this meeting. I wanted them to see me not as Lucy the daughter who says no, but as Lucy the senior analyst who ruins people for a living if the math doesn't add up. They arrived at 10:05. Walker walked in first, wearing a blazer over a t-shirt, sunglasses perched on his head, looking annoyed but confident. Mom looked frail, her eyes darting around the room, refusing to meet mine. Dad looked like a ghost. He was wearing the same jacket he'd had for 10 years, and it hung loosely on his frame. Nice place, Walker sneered, pulling out a chair and reclining in it. Bit sterile, though. Corporate servitude suits you. Sit down, Walker, I said, not looking up from my laptop. Look, let's make this quick, Walker said, checking his watch, the fake Rolex I knew he'd bought recently. I've got a meeting with investors at noon. Dad needs $6,000. I told him I'd cover it next week, but he's panicking. So if you write the check, we can all go back to our lives. Investors, I looked at him. For which company? Walker Logistics, he said without missing a beat. The trucking fleet, we're expanding. I see, I turned to Dad. And you, Dad, why do you need the money? You have a pension, you have Social Security, you have the savings account. Dad rubbed his hands together nervously. Well, like I said, we invested. Walker says the return on investment is going to be 20% by next month. We just moved some funds around. Moved some funds around, I repeated. I reached into my bag and pulled out the binder. I slammed it onto the table. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Mom flinched. Let's talk about where those funds moved, I said. I opened the binder to the first tab, the bank statements. I slid a copy across the table to Dad. This is your checking account as of this morning, I said. -$42, you didn't move funds, you evaporated them. Walker sat up straight. Where did you get that? That's illegal, you hacked us. I didn't hack anything, I said calmly. You were too lazy to remove me as the administrator on the account I set up for them 5 years ago. I received a poverty alert on my birthday. Happy birthday to me, by the way. Mom finally looked up, her eyes watering. Lucy, we didn't mean to. Stop, I silenced her. I turned to the next page. And this is the savings account. It's gone. 40 years of savings, gone in 8 months. It's invested, Walker shouted, his face turning red. You don't understand how business works. You have to spend money to make money. That capital is tied up in assets. Assets, I laughed. It was a cold, sharp sound. You mean assets like this? I slid the next sheet across. It was the transaction log, highlighting the gambling sites. DraftKings $500, FanDuel $1000, BetMGM $2,500. Is BetMGM a logistics partner, Walker? I asked. Is that where you're sourcing your fleet? Dad picked up the paper. His hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. He squinted at the lines. Walker, what is this? What is FanDuel? It's a hedge fund platform, Walker stammered, sweat breaking out on his forehead. It's high-risk, high-reward trading. Dad, she's manipulating the data. She's trying to make me look bad because she's jealous. Jealous? I stood up. I'm not jealous, Walker. I'm the only thing standing between this family and the street. You're lying, Walker stood up too, pointing a finger at me. Mom, don't listen to her. She's always hated that I had big ideas. She wants you to be small and scared like her. "Sit down," I roared. It was the first time I had ever raised my voice like that in a professional setting. The authority in my voice was absolute. Walker, stunned, actually sat. "I am not done," I said, lowering my voice to a dangerous whisper. "Because the gambling isn't the worst part. The worst part is the house." The color drained from my mother's face. The house. "Tell them, Walker," I said. "Tell them what you did with the title." "I didn't do anything," he muttered, looking at the door. "He took out a HELOC," I told my parents. "A home equity line of credit. He convinced you to sign papers, probably telling you it was for business insurance or a tax shelter. But it wasn't. It was a loan against the roof over your heads." "We signed papers for the LLC registration," Dad whispered, looking at Walker with dawning horror. "You signed a lien," I corrected. "And it is 60 days past due. You owe $145,000, and the bank has already issued a notice of intent to foreclose." The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy and suffocating. "Is that true?" Mom whispered, turning to her golden child. "Walker, is the house in trouble?" Walker looked cornered. He looked from Mom to Dad, and then his face twisted into a sneer. "It wouldn't be in trouble if you just gave me a little more time. The payout is coming. If Lucy hadn't cut us off, I wouldn't have had to leverage the equity. This is her fault." He pointed at me. She forced my hand. The delusion was complete. He truly believed it. I looked at my father. He was staring at the gambling transactions, tears rolling silently down his cheeks. The hero worship was cracking. The image of the successful son was dissolving, replaced by the reality of a gambling addict who had sold his parents' future. "I'm not giving you $6,000, I said to Dad. "I'm not giving you a cent, because if I give it to you, he will take it." "Then why are we here?" Walker spat. "To say goodbye," I lied. "Unless you want to survive, in which case things are going to change, drastically." The meeting ended in chaos. Walker stormed out, accusing me of sabotage. Mom was weeping uncontrollably. Dad just sat there, staring at the binder as if it were a bomb that had already detonated. I didn't give them the money. I sent them home in an Uber because I didn't trust Walker to drive them safely in his rage. But Walker wasn't done. That night, my phone blew up, not from family, but from flying monkeys. Aunts and cousins I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly messaging me. "I can't believe you'd humiliate your brother like that. Walker says you forged bank documents to try and get power of attorney. You need help, Lucy. How can you let your father drive a broken car? You're heartless." He was spinning the narrative. He was telling everyone I was the aggressor, the liar, the jealous sister trying to steal the inheritance. He was desperate. He knew that if the extended family found out the truth, his reputation, his only currency, would be worthless. But while he was playing PR games on Facebook, I was digging for the final nail in the coffin. I knew about the gambling. I knew about the HELOC. But there was still a gap. The math didn't quite close. $145,000 plus the drain savings was nearly $200,000 gone in 8 months. Even a bad gambler doesn't lose that consistently without help. I went back to the Walker Ventures transfers. I looked closer at the timestamps. They were consistent, every Friday at 4:00 p.m. I called a friend of mine, a private investigator named Sarah, who I sometimes used for due diligence on corporate mergers. "Sarah, I need you to run a name," I said, "and I need you to check a vehicle registration." I gave her the plate number of Walker's $60,000 truck. She called me back 3 hours later. "Lucy, you're not going to like this." "Tell me." "The truck isn't registered to Walker," she said. "It's registered to a Prestige Leasing Corp. It's a rental, Lucy. A long-term, high-interest lease. He doesn't own it. He's paying $3,000 a month just to drive it." "And the Friday transfers." "Alimony," she said. I froze. "What?" "He was married," Sarah said. "Briefly, in Vegas 2 years ago, to a woman named Crystal. They annulled it, but there was a settlement. He defaulted on it, so now he's paying massive penalties to keep her from garnishing his wages, if he had wages. He's paying her off with your parents' house money to keep her quiet, so nobody finds out he was married. My parents were conservative, old-school Catholic. A secret Vegas marriage and a messy payoff would devastate them almost as much as the bankruptcy. He wasn't just a thief, he was living a double life. I printed Sarah's report. This was it. This was the end of him. I didn't call a meeting this time. I drove to my parents' house. It was a Friday evening. I knew Walker would be there, probably trying to convince them to sign over the car title or something else he could liquidate. I pulled into the driveway. The black truck was there. I parked right behind it, blocking him in. I walked to the front door. It was unlocked. I stepped inside. The living room was dark, lit only by the TV. Dad was sitting in his recliner, looking 10 years older than he had last week. Mom was on the sofa, knitting furiously, a nervous tic she'd had since I was a child. Walker was in the kitchen, eating a sandwich, talking loudly on his phone. "Yeah, the funds are clearing Monday, bro. Just hold the spot. I'm good for it." He saw me and froze. He hung up the phone. "What are you doing here?" he demanded. "Get out, you're trespassing." "I'm here to save this house," I said, walking past him into the living room. "Miles, Lydia, look at me." They looked up. There was fear in their eyes. Fear of me, fear of the truth. "I found out why the money is gone," I said. "All of it." "We don't want to hear it," Mom said, her voice trembling. Walker explained it. "It was a market correction. He's fixing it." "He's not fixing it, Mom. He's renting it," I said. "What?" Dad asked. "The truck," I said, pointing to the driveway. "He doesn't own it. He didn't need a loan to buy it because he's leasing it for $3,000 a month. He lied to get you to sign the HELOC so he could make the lease payments." "That's a lie," Walker screamed, charging into the room. "She's lying, it's my truck." "And," I continued, raising my voice over his, "he's not paying investors. He's paying Crystal." Walker stopped dead in his tracks. His face went pale white. "Who is Crystal?" Mom asked, the knitting needles stopping. "His ex-wife," I said. The silence that followed was different from the silence in the office. This was the silence of a universe shattering. "Wife," Dad whispered. "Walker, you're not married." "He was," I said, holding up the marriage certificate and the settlement agreement Sarah had found. "For 3 months, in Las Vegas. 2 years ago. He's been using the home equity money to pay her hush money so you wouldn't find out." I walked over to Dad and placed the papers in his lap. "He stole your retirement, he mortgaged your house, and he destroyed our relationship. All to pay for a truck he doesn't own and a secret wife he doesn't have anymore." Walker lunged for the papers. "Give me those." But Dad was faster. He grabbed Walker's wrist. His grip was surprisingly strong. He looked at the marriage certificate. He looked at the dates. He looked at the amounts. Then Miles, the man who had never raised a hand too, his golden child, stood up. He looked at Walker with a mesmerizing mix of heartbreak and pure, unadulterated rage. "Is this true?" Dad asked. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a judge passing a death sentence. "Dad, listen, Crystal is crazy, she trapped me." Walker started to babble. "Is it true?" Dad bellowed, the sound shaking the walls. Walker shrank back. I was going to pay you back, I just needed time." It was a confession. Mom let out a sob that sounded like a wounded animal. She dropped her knitting and buried her face in her hands. Dad looked at me. "How much time do we have?" "Before the foreclosure," I asked. 3 weeks, maybe 4. Dad nodded. He turned back to Walker. "Get out." "Dad, come on, let's talk about this." "Get out," Dad screamed, pointing at the door. "Get out of my house. Get out of my life. You leave now, or I swear to God, I will call the police and report the theft myself." Walker looked at Mom. She didn't look up. He looked at me with pure hatred. "You happy now?" he hissed at me. "You won." "I didn't win," I said, looking at my broken parents. "Nobody won. Now get out." Walker grabbed his keys and ran out the door. We heard the truck roar to life, tires screeching as he peeled out of the driveway, fleeing the ruin he had created. I stood there in the living room with the two people who had shunned me for 8 months. The silence was back, but this time, it wasn't a weapon. It was the dust settling after a demolition. "Lucy," Dad whispered, sinking back into his chair, covering his eyes. "Oh God, Lucy, what have we done?" You would think that being exposed as a fraud, a thief, and a liar in your own parents' living room would be enough to make a person retreat into the shadows. You would think Walker would pack his bags, leave town, and lick his wounds in obscurity. But you have to understand the psychology of a narcissist. To Walker, the confrontation in the living room wasn't a defeat, it was a temporary setback in his narrative control. He didn't see himself as the villain. He saw himself as the victim of a jealous sister and confused parents. And he decided that if he was going down, he was going to take my reputation with him. The invitation had been on the fridge for months, Aunt Carol and Uncle Ben's 50th wedding anniversary. It was the social event of the season for our extended family. A rented banquet hall, a catered dinner, cousins flying in from out of state. In the 3 days following the showdown at the house, my phone had been silent, but the family gossip mill had been running at nuclear capacity. Walker had gotten to them first. He had called Aunt Carol. He had called the cousins. He had spun a story that was truly breathtaking in its audacity. Lucy has manipulated Mom and Dad. She's declared them mentally incompetent to seize control of their assets. She kicked me out because I was the only one protecting them. When I arrived at my parents' house to pick them up for the party, they were terrified. "We can't go, Lucy," Mom said, wringing her hands. She looked 10 years older than she had a week ago. The house felt empty, the silence heavy with the ghost of the son they had lost. "Everyone is talking. Carol called me and asked if I was safe with you." "That is exactly why we have to go," I said, adjusting my dress. I had chosen a sharp navy blue suit armor. If we stay home, his lie becomes the truth. We go, we hold our heads high, and we face him. Dad sat at the kitchen table, staring at his hands. "I can't face them, Lucy. I'm ashamed. I let him do this. I let him fool me." I knelt beside him. "You didn't let him do anything, Dad. You loved him. That's not a crime, but hiding the truth, that ends today." We drove to the banquet hall in silence. When we walked in, the air in the room shifted instantly. It was physical. The chatter died down. Heads turned. I saw Aunt Carol whisper something to Uncle Ben. I saw my cousins glancing at us with a mixture of pity and suspicion. And there, in the center of the room, holding a glass of champagne, was Walker. He looked impeccable. He was wearing a tailored suit, smiling, charming the room. When he saw us, his smile didn't falter. It widened. It was a predator's smile. He walked right up to us, loudly enough for the surrounding tables to hear. "Mom, Dad," he boomed, opening his arms. "I'm so glad you could make it. I was worried Lucy wouldn't let you out of the house." The accusation hung in the air, coated in fake concern. "Hello, Walker," I said, stepping between him and our parents. "I wasn't talking to you, Lucy," he said, his eyes cold but his voice sickeningly sweet. "I'm talking to our parents. You know, the ones you've been isolating." Aunt Carol walked over, looking concerned. "Is everything okay here? Miles, you look terrible." "He's been under a lot of stress, Aunt Carol," Walker said quickly, placing a hand on Dad's shoulder. Dad flinched. "It's hard when you realize your own daughter is trying to declare you incompetent just to get power of attorney." A gasp rippled through the nearby circle of relatives. This was his play. A public execution of my character to invalidate the evidence I held. "That's not true," I said, my voice steady. "Walker, stop." "Stop what? Telling the truth?" Walker raised his voice, drawing the attention of the entire hall. "I think everyone here deserves to know why I'm living out of a suitcase right now. It's because my sister couldn't stand that I was succeeding. She's jealous. She's bitter. And she's using Dad's dementia to take over the estate." "Dementia?" Dad said, his voice shaking. I don't have dementia. See, Walker said, looking around the room with a sad shake of his head. He's confused. It's heartbreaking. I tried to protect them, but she forced me out. She cut me off. The murmurs were getting louder. How could she? Poor Walker. Miles does look confused. I felt the heat rising in my neck. He was winning. He was using their love, their ignorance, and their pity to bury the truth. I looked at my parents. They were shrinking, humiliated, unable to fight back against the golden child they had created. I realized then that polite denials wouldn't work. Logic wouldn't work. The only thing that breaks a lie this big is a truth so hard and heavy it shatters the floorboards. I walked over to the DJ booth, where a microphone sat on a stand. "Lucy, don't make a scene," Walker hissed, stepping toward me. I ignored him. I grabbed the mic. "I'd like to make a toast," I said. My voice boomed through the speakers, cutting through the murmurs. The room went silent. "To Aunt Carol and Uncle Ben," I began. 50 years of honesty. 50 years of building a life together. It's beautiful." I turned to face Walker. The room followed my gaze. "And I'd like to address my brother's concerns about our parents' finances," I continued. "Cut the mic," Walker shouted, lunging forward. Uncle Ben stepped in his way, confused but sensing the tension. "Let her speak, Walker," Uncle Ben said. "Thank you," I said. "Walker says I am jealous of his success. He says I am stealing from our parents, but I think the family should know exactly what that success looks like." I reached into my bag. I didn't bring the binder. I brought one single piece of paper, the foreclosure notice I had received via certified mail that morning, redirected to my address. "This," I said, holding it up, "is a notice of foreclosure on Miles and Lydia's home." The room gasped. "It is dated 3 days ago," I said, my voice ringing with clarity. "It states that the homeowner is $145,000 in debt on a home equity line of credit, a loan taken out 8 months ago." I looked directly at Walker. He was pale, sweat glistening on his forehead. "Walker claims I cut him off," I said. "And I did. I refused to co-sign a loan for his truck. So instead, he tricked our parents into signing their house away to fund his lifestyle." "She's lying, it's a forgery," Walker screamed, his voice cracking. "I also have the transaction records," I said, pulling out a second sheet. "From the business account, DraftKings, FanDuel, and a leasing company in Nevada." I turned to the crowd, to the aunts and cousins who had judged me. "The truck outside? He doesn't own it. He leases it for $3,000 a month using Mom's Social Security checks. The investors? They don't exist. He's been paying alimony to an ex-wife he married in Vegas 2 years ago and never told anyone about." Aunt Carol covered her mouth. "A wife. Her name is Crystal," I said. "And she's the only one getting paid. Miles and Lydia have $42 in their checking account. Their retirement is gone. Their tools are sold. They are here tonight in a borrowed car because Walker ignored the transmission warning light on their sedan until the engine blew because he was too busy gambling away their grocery money." I lowered the paper. I looked at my brother, who was now standing alone in the center of the room. The charm was gone. The mask had slipped completely, revealing the panicked, small man beneath. "I am not stealing their estate, Walker," I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm. "I am the only reason they still have a roof to sleep under tonight, so you can tell your stories. You can play the victim, but you will never, ever come near them again." The silence in the hall was absolute. It wasn't the silence of confusion anymore. It was the silence of judgment. Uncle Ben turned to Walker. He looked at the expensive suit, the watch, the arrogance. Then he looked at his brother Miles, broken and weeping softly in a chair. "Is this true, son?" Uncle Ben asked. Walker looked around the room. He looked for an ally. He looked for someone to manipulate. But the facts were too stark. The foreclosure notice was visible eye. And my hand. The specific details about the gambling and the ex-wife were too precise to be improvised. I was going to fix it," Walker stammered. "It was just a liquidity issue." Get out, Uncle Ben said quietly. Uncle Ben, she's crazy. Get out, Ben roared, pointing at the exit. Get out of my party. Get out of this family's sight. Walker looked at Mom. She turned her head away. He looked at Dad. Dad was holding Mom's hand, staring at the floor. Walker sneered. He straightened his jacket, trying to salvage some scrap of dignity. Fine, you're all boring losers anyway. I don't need you. I've got deals closing on Monday that will blow your minds. He turned and walked out. The heavy double doors swung shut behind him. The silence lingered for a moment. Then I put the microphone down. I walked over to my parents. I knelt down and put my arms around them. It's over, I whispered. He can't hurt you anymore. Aunt Carol walked over. She didn't say anything. She just wrapped her arms around all three of us, and for the first time in 8 months, the family circle was whole again. The fallout wasn't pretty. Real life doesn't wrap up with a bow just because the villain leaves the room. The next morning, the reality of the numbers set in. I sat at my parents' kitchen table, surrounded by boxes of financial documents. The foreclosure notice was real. The debt was real. The emotional devastation was real. We couldn't save the house. The equity was drained too low, and the market had cooled. The payments on the HELOC had ballooned to a rate my parents simply couldn't afford on their fixed income. We have to sell, I told them gently. If we sell now, before the bank auctions it, we can pay off the debt. There won't be much left, maybe enough for a small down payment on a condo, but you'll be debt-free. Dad looked around the kitchen he had tiled himself 20 years ago. He looked at the backyard where he had taught Walker to throw a baseball. Tears welled in his eyes, but he nodded. Okay, he said. It's just a house. It's just wood and brick. It's the right choice, Dad, I said. I took over everything. I obtained power of attorney, not to steal from them, but to protect them from themselves. I consolidated their accounts. I negotiated with the bank to hold off the foreclosure proceedings for 90 days to allow for a private sale. I canceled the credit cards Walker had access to. I changed every password, every PIN number, every security question. The house sold in 2 months. It was a sad day when the moving truck came. Watching Dad walk through the empty workshop, running his hand along the dusty workbench where his tools used to be, broke my heart. But it was a clean break. We moved them into a 2-bedroom condo in a senior living community about 10 minutes from my apartment. It was safe. It was manageable. And most importantly, it was theirs. As for Walker, his deals never closed on Monday. Without the influx of cash from the HELOC, his house of cards collapsed instantly. The leasing company repossessed the truck 2 weeks after the anniversary party. I heard through the grapevine that it was an ugly scene in a grocery store parking lot. He was screaming, "Do you know who I am?" while the tow truck driver hooked it up. Crystal, the ex-wife, didn't get her hush money, so she stopped being hushed. She posted everything on social media, the gambling debts, the fake businesses, the lies. It destroyed whatever credibility he had left in town. The last I heard, he was living in a motel on the outskirts of the city, dodging process servers for 3 different lawsuits. He tried to call Dad once, about a month after the move. I was there when the phone rang. Dad looked at the caller ID, Walker. He looked at me, then he looked at Mom. "Do you want to answer it?" I asked. Dad picked up the phone. He pressed the block contact button. He set the phone back down. "No," he said, "I don't think I do." That evening, after we had unpacked the last of the boxes in the new condo, Mom made a pot of tea. We sat on their new, smaller balcony, watching the sunset. It was peaceful. No drama, no crises, just the hum of the city and the warmth of the tea. "Lucy," Mom said, reaching out to take my hand. Her grip was frail but firm. "Yes, Mom." "I'm sorry," she said. Her voice was thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry, for the birthday, for the silence, for choosing the lie because it was prettier than the truth." "I know, Mom," I said, squeezing her hand. "You were always the strong one," Dad added, looking at me with a respect I hadn't seen in his eyes since I was a child. We took that for granted. We thought you didn't need us because you were capable. We thought Walker needed us because he was broken. We got it backward. You didn't need our help, but you deserved our love. And we withheld it. I'm just glad you're safe, I said, and I meant it. The anger I had held for Ig. HT months had evaporated, replaced by a quiet, steady resolve. I wasn't just the daughter anymore. I wasn't just the financial analyst. I was the matriarch of this new, smaller, honest family. Happy belated birthday, honey, Dad said, smiling weakly. I smiled back, thanks, Dad. We sat there as the sun went down, 3 survivors of a storm we never saw coming, but which we had weathered together. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was full of understanding. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like a stranger. I felt like I was home.